Welcome to another Cetis training video. Today I'm going to discuss the global file method for configuration of Cetis VoIP phones. This method will be available in general releases after 3.0.0.040 and is not available in the current GA. In 3.0.0.040 there are currently two methods to configure the phones automatically. One is the MAC file method, which uses the MAC address named configuration file for each individual phone in an installation. And the other is the config ID file method, which instead of using the MAC address, uses a config ID named file, generally based off of the extension or room number of where the phone is going to be installed. But for the GAs that we're introducing after 040, we're going to have a new method called the global file method. Unlike the other two methods, where the phone had to have its own individual configuration file, the global file method uses the same file for every phone, and then when the phone boots up, all the user has to do is enter the extension information, which is generally just 4 digits. The phone will then use that information to configure the 4 or 5 custom fields that are necessary to register to the PBX. Creating configuration files has gotten much easier with the global file method. You only have to create one configuration file for a basic installation. You only have to load it on the TFTP server. You can change that file if any of the base settings change. Moreover, the web UI now supports exporting that global configuration file, so you don't have to have a special program to create the file like in previous versions of Cetis firmware. So let's quickly create a global configuration file. So just to give an example, let's configure some call features here. We want speed dial 100, speed dial 200, speed dial 300, speed dial 400. We'll make that transfer. Okay, apply that. So those are some base settings that we want all of our phones to have. It's not the custom extension information that you will find in these 3 or 4 fields right here. These will be configured when the phone boots up and prompts for the extension. So all of these are going to be the same 4-digit extension that you put on. Optionally, you can open the configuration file and make the password like maybe the same for all phones instead of being the same as the extension. Maybe you want test to be the same password for every phone in the installation instead of 1234 for one extension, 1235, etc. One thing that we do need to do is enable the service here and also put in the register server address, which will be probably the same for all phones on site. Let's press apply. So now that we have some custom input in the call features here, we're going to go to provision, go to the bottom where it says export global config file and press export. And that's going to save global.cetis.cfg. Going to want to drag that to our TFTP server. Let me rename this real quickly. Global. We want to delete this one right here, which is a previous global I downloaded, and rename this one to just global.cetis.cfg. There we go. And now we're going to drag that to your TFTP server, however you get that on your TFTP server. Okay, so when I boot up a phone, it should have those custom buttons, and it should ask me for my extension information. Now there's one more thing. Because I don't have passwords on my system that are quite the same as my extension, I need to configure my extension to make this work on the first go. But when you're setting up the extension, if you want to use this method, I advise using the same password as the extension or using the same password for all phones. Let's see. Where's the global? And here's the global. I'm going to edit that. And I'm going to change the password field for the SIP info. So it doesn't have it in there, so I'm going to add it in there. So the extension I'm going to configure the phone, the extension number I'm going to put in is 1300. So I've typed in the password to make sure that it registers to the system. Save that. Yes. Exit. Yes. Okay. So I have that done. Now we just need to boot up the phone and see those changes. Let's take a look at some of the pros and cons of the global file method while I'm waiting for this phone to boot. Some pros: easy replacements. There's only one configuration file, so you only ever have to change one configuration file. Put a phone in a room, type in the extension number, that's it. No worrying about a new config ID file, a new MAC address file. It's done. So easy global changes also. If a speed dial changes for the entire installation, change the global. You don't have to regenerate 150 files. Easy phone adds, no extra software because it can be all exported from the web UI. One thing, it's going to require some extra setup to make sure you have a provisioning server, but that's a plus in the long run. It's also going to, if you have a lot of customization, say groups of phones like admin or lobby, you're going to have to use partial.cetis.cfg to customize those groups of phones. This video won't go into that right now, but take a look at the documentation at support.cetis.com. Okay, let's take a look at the grand finale here. It's waiting for network, still waiting,
Enter
boom,
extension.
you get the prompt.
One, three, zero,
Once you enter
zero.
the extension number, it pulls up, registers, and that's it. Let's take a look at our call features and make sure our speed dials came through from the global, and there they are. So that's how the global works. You have one file for all of your base settings, which works for most installations, and the end user enters the extension information. The only thing you need to make sure is the password is the same as the extension, or change it to one password after the global's been created. Thanks for joining me, and be sure to check out more information at support.cetis.com.